with the jury what validity is.
Validity would be, again, if you can trust the data set.
How does that differ from reliability?
I'm not exactly sure in which context. I think the two are fairly similar.
Would it help you if I told you what I thought, that if reliability is indicating that you're getting the same result over and over, and validity would be that something is measuring it for the thing that it's saying it's measuring it for?
Okay.
Does that make some sense?
Makes sense, yes.
Did you do any validity studies on this data and or information or software prior to committing it to animation?
I did not.
Did you inquire into anybody that had done it either in Finland or anywhere else as to this information and data that you had prior to committing it to animation?
No, I did not.
And in the normal protocol, this is your first time creating an animation such as this, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you have 15 years with FBI, 16 now, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you have just over 10 years in the technical forensics unit, correct?
That's correct.
And this is something you created at the behest of the prosecution and or law enforcement based on this case, is that correct?
It's based on this case, correct.
Okay. And then it's only as good as that data and information and reliability, validity provided to you, correct?
It's the data that was obtained from the phone.
Okay.
And then as requested by us to the sports tracker company to decode it for us.
Okay. What do you think is what's the standard deviation? In terms of when you're talking about the reliability or validity of something, if you're talking, I think these days we hear that's a lot in context of political polls. You'll hear that there's a standard deviation rate.
Like the margin for error?
I think that's better. Yes, sir. Did you do such a thing with this to see?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you ever go out to the scene in Armada?
To the scene, I did not, no.
You did not. So just so that ladies and gentlemen of the jury are understanding, the prosecution gives you some data, you contact the CEO in Finland, you get some manner in which you can translate and download it. You do that, correct?
The prosecution did not give me.
No, no, the data came from that.
The data came from the phone.
Sorry?
The data came from the phone.
The data came from the phone, but the interpretive tools came from the company?
The data points came from the company.
Okay, would you explain what
Sure.
data points are?
The files we had that came off the phone were in a proprietary format for that sports tracker application. We had no tools that could read those file formats in such a way that we could see what those data points are. So in order to read those data points or get those data points, we had to enlist the help of the company that created that application, that wrote the sports tracker application, to help us decode that data, which is what we did.
Okay, and in response to one of Mr. Daly's questioning, you indicated a different Fitbit, and I know that's probably a brand name, right, as opposed to a generic term, but these exercise applications, they differ, correct?
They're different applications, correct,
Right.
by different companies.
And they differ as to what they measure, correct?
They differ mostly, I think, in how they look. As far as the interface to the user, I believe they function very similarly in that they rely on GPS data of the device that's being used.
Okay, maybe I'm mistaken, but let's just say that wouldn't one measure maybe footsteps if you're walking, one more for running, one may measure heart rate, one may not?
Correct. They might collect different data.
Right, so they would be different, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What did you find out about the sports tracker? What did it claim to depict or measure?
Well, the video shows the data that of what it collects. It collects.
But I'd like you to explain to the jury, you being an expert witness,
Okay.
what it is. If I were to come into the store and say, I have a sports tracker, and you're going to try to tell me, okay, here it is, let me hook you up. What would you want to tell me to sell me on it? What does it measure? What good is it?
It measures your route for a particular exercise that you're doing, whether it be walking or running or cycling. Measures the location of the route that you take, the speed at which you move, and like I said, if you had a heart rate monitor that you could link up to the sports tracker application, would also record that as well.
And I think the judge may have asked this question, how does it differentiate between if I'm running or if I'm on a bike, or is that something I press in, or how does that work?
That I'm unaware. I don't know if the application can differentiate between what exercise you're doing.
What about the speed? How is the accuracy of the speed reported in your animation? How is that arrived at?
The speed in the animation was calculated through the Google Earth application.
And how does one do that? Just so we understand.
Well, I don't know how Google does it specifically. I can tell you how rates and speeds are calculated, if you'd like to know that.
Okay, yeah.
There's typically a formula for speed and distance. Rate times time equals distance. However, when you're dealing with a speed on the Earth, you have to take into account the curvature of the Earth to correctly calculate that speed. It's a very complex calculation at that point, instead of a simple rate times time equals distance. So that calculation is what's being done within Google Earth.
Okay, that takes into account the elliptical nature of
the spherical nature of the Earth, and because we have two of the variables in that equation. We have the location. We would have a distance between 2 points in that workout, and we would also have the time at which we would arrive at those points. Therefore, the application could calculate the speed between point A and point B. And with this data set, we had over 3,000 data points, so it was calculating the speed between each individual consecutive data point.
Do you have any notes with you, sir? That's fine.
I don't have any notes with me right now.
Did you bring any with you that may be a council data?
No.
Do you have anything to indicate, if you remember exactly what time that last text message was sent to the second?
That was to the second?
If you know.
I don't know the second, but it was 6:28 p.m.
Very good. Now, do you remember testifying in this matter at a preliminary exam held before the Honorable Judge Ledoux?
I do.
And do you remember, well, not do you remember, but if I were to tell you that you answered 6:28 and 17 seconds, Eastern Standard Daylight Time, would you have any reason to dispute that?
I would not.
And that's for the text message, correct?
Correct.
As I indicated. And we went on to talk about the telephone calls that were made. Same thing, you don't have your notes, you're not a council table, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you remember the time of the first call?
I believe it was 6:31 and I think 57 seconds.
Excellent. That's exactly right. The second call, sir?
I believe 6:32, I believe it was 19 seconds, is that correct?
That's exactly right. And call number 3?
6:33, and I'm sorry, I don't know this, I can't remember the seconds on the last one.
I told you 36 seconds, would that ring a bell? Now, the fact that you testified in this case back December 15th and 16th, I believe, you came back both days, correct?
That's correct.
We can get you a cost?
Right.
Okay. So December 15th and 16th of 2014, and you gave these answers, you must have either had your report review or studied it just prior to giving them to be able to give answers right down to the second, would you think?
I would think so.
You wouldn't have just said 36, 33, 19, 57 sound like good numbers. I'll just...
No, you certainly didn't make it up.
Oh, I'm not saying that at all. I just want to make sure that I'm not putting any words in your mouth. But I'm telling you that...
I don't believe you are.
Okay. And the fact that when you were asked these times of these telephone calls that you were precise enough to give seconds, either you had very good memory then, or either you had notes, or you had something that was facilitating and stimulating your recall, correct?
That's good.
Remember what number was called those 3 times, 631, 632, and 633?
810-882-2469.
I'm amazed. If you reviewed your notes, how do you know that number so far after the event?
prepared for trial.
And did you ever have occasion to call that number?
I did not know.
Do you know if anybody from the Bureau called the number?
I'm not sure.
Were you ever told whose number that is, or if it's an active number?
I was not told, no.
Did you inquire at all? Was that ever important to you? And I'm not saying it necessarily should be with the task you were asked to do. But was that something that was ever important to you to find out who April Millsap would have called at 6:28, 6:31, and 6:32? I'm sorry, 6:31, 6:32, and 6:33.
I did not have an occasion to investigate that. It's not under my area.
Okay, so you have no light that you could shed on that, correct?
That is correct.
Subsequently, from speaking to your co-workers and or preparing for this case, or speaking with the prosecutors, or what I see in this case, did you find out anything about that 810 number?
I heard that it did not come back to any particular individual.
And certainly, again, I don't want to put words in the mouth, but you never heard anything about it being affiliated in any way, shape, or manner to the defendant in this case, did you?
I did not.
And don't you think that's something that probably would have been a very big deal if that were the case?
I would imagine so, yes.
Now, you also imported longitude, latitude, and date and time information into Google Earth to arrive at this animation, correct?
That is correct.
And would you please be so kind as to explain to us what longitude is?
Longitude?
Yes, longitude.
Well, lines of longitude on the Earth is used to determine location in a east-west direction.
So they would be horizontal lines?
Well, the lines are vertical.
Oh, they're vertical. Okay. And they measure east and west?
Your vertical, your horizontal position, your east-west position on the Earth, falls either between a line of longitude or can give you a specific line of longitude that you would be located in an east-west direction.
And what is latitude?
Latitude is used to measure your position on the Earth in a north-south orientation.
So that would be horizontal, correct?
That is, lines of latitude are horizontal on the globe. Yes.
And before you create animation or anything, how close do you want to be that you have the correct longitude and latitude?
From what standpoint, sir?
I actually don't know because I don't know, is it by seconds or how do you tell? In other words,
they're in the. Are you asking me the units?
Yes, sir.
Oh, they're in decimal degrees is what they're measured in.
And would a decimal degree make a difference? If you were, in other words, to your reading, to your interpretation, or to the animation that you meant, if you were off by a decimal or two, either the longitude or latitude?
Could you please clarify the question a little bit?
Yes, sir. This animation that you have created based on information that you received, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, if some of the information that you received was off, either the longitude, the latitude, or both, would that have affected the animation that's been presented to the jury?
Off in what sense, sir?
Well, I mean, if you had a different longitude or latitude, would your animation be any different, or would you say, hey, this is what the prosecution wants?
Different from what, I guess is what I'm asking.
Different from if there was not a mistake. In other words, if it was 4 versus if it was 6.
It would depend on what digit in the coordinates that state, if you will, fell. Where in the decimal point? If it was in the first 2 digits before the decimal point, the left of the decimal point, or if it was the 5th digit after the decimal point.
Let's just keep it at 2. Let's say 2 after the decimal point.
That could be significant, yes.
And again, I'm not well versed in science. Would it make a difference if it's longitude, latitude, or would it be just as erroneous if you had wrong figures?
It would probably be in either direction, whether it's north-south or east-west.
Okay, so let me just ask you this. The animation's not on here. I just talk with my hands. Okay. Let's say the animation's on here, right? And let's say that the longitude is off by 2 degrees, 2 points after the decimal point. Okay. How would that affect the animation? Would it be slower? Would it be faster? Would it show things more east, west, north, south? How would that be translated into the animation?
Is that for one data point?
Yeah, let's say one data point.
If it was for one data point, it would there would probably be a very erratic departure from the path that it had been normally following.
What if it's 2 data points past the decimal?
Which one?
Deeper. If,
To the left or to the right of the decimal?
let's say to the left first.
To the left, as you move to the left of the decimal point, any deviation of those digits is going to be a very big deviation. Anything as you move to the right of the decimal point, as you get 4 or 5 digits to the right of the decimal point in latitude and longitude, the difference would be much smaller.
Okay, because that's fractional, correct?
Correct.
Okay, these are whole numbers.
Big numbers, correct.
Okay, gotcha. Now, part of the purpose of this animation that's created is to try to illustrate to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the path that April Millsap and or her phone took, correct?
The path that went to
The phone took, exactly, okay. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Why is there all this jagginess where it's going over fields and across buildings? I'm not understanding that.
That's, I would say that's probably within the, if you will, the margin of error of the GPS device.
Okay, did you take any steps and or efforts to try to determine the deviation of that particular GPS that was used to formulate this animation?
I did not.
So you really could not tell us, ladies and gentlemen, in a quantitative manner how deviant your animation is from actuality, correct?
I would say from actuality,
Yes.
I could not tell you the exact path that was taken. That's the path that was taken as reported by the GPS.
Okay, so everything you have is information given to you, you take it, and from what it seems like, you're a very precise individual, you take this information and you create this. But if that information is off, then obviously your animation is going to be off, correct?
Can you please clarify what you mean by off?
Okay. I'll remind myself, I know I talk really fast. Okay. One thing should you understand, this this courtroom is on a system where it only takes one person at a time, so we just can't talk at the same time, right? You just hold like that on the call. What you indicated is that this animation was created based on information that you received, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. None of this was information that you went out and looked to scale or measure or do any of that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So then you created this animation for the very first time, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So if the information that was given to you was erroneous, if it was off, then the animation has to be off, correct?
If the information was off, yes.
Okay. And truthfully speaking, you have made no inquiries into if any of this information, the reliability, the validity, the longitude, the latitude, the GPS deviation, any of that, if it was off or not, correct?
I did not ask the company those questions, correct?
Or anybody else, right?
Correct.
And sir, if I believe correctly, you indicated that at one point the movement is at 3.8 miles per hour. Do you remember that? In the direct testimony when Mr. Daly asked you, the initial movement, I believe.
I think you were referring to, are you referring to the video from the test iPhone? Is that what you're asking?
You know, I remember the question and answer between Mr. Daly and you. I don't remember what
That was,
what
we were referring to the speed chart that was shown on the test iPhone, which is data directly from April's iPhone copied to the test iPhone.
Okay, and sir, I believe you indicated that it went up to, or at some point it went to 22 miles per hour, correct?
Correct.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you had some indication that it went even a little higher than that, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember what the upper limit was?
Appeared to be 34 miles an hour.
34 miles an hour. And I don't remember if it was you or Special Agent Hess that I asked at the exam if is it possible that the dog could have, been running with
You asked me.
I did ask you.
Yes.
And I think your answer, if I remember correctly, was if a dog can run 30 miles an hour, correct?
I believe it was, yes.
And sir, would it surprise you to know that border collies like what Ms. April Millsap had run at about 30 miles an hour? Just for sake of argument, did you ever go see if that was accurate or not after we had that questioning?
I did not, no.
Or would it surprise you to know that that's essentially what it is?
It would surprise me.
Do you think it would be less, or do you think it would be more?
I honestly have no opinion of the speed of a border collie.
No, so, and I'm not trying to be facetious. What I'm asking is, you indicated that it would trouble you. I'm sorry. So usually when things trouble us, it's because they sound either too low or too high. So does it, that's 30 miles an hour for the top speed of a border collie sound to you like it is too low or too much?
No, that, as a top speed of a border collie, that doesn't surprise me.
Okay. Now, at the exam, you were asked if you have some expertise in the area of GPS accuracy, and I believe at that point you indicated, I don't have any expertise in GPS accuracy. Do you stand by that statement, or do you think that's a misprint?
No, I stand by that statement.
And since that time, have you gained any expertise in GPS?
I have not.
Those pins that we talked about, those pin cushions that were indicating the telephone calls and the text,
Yes,
you inserted those into the Google Earth application,
I
correct?
did.
Based on information you were given about the telephone and text records, correct?
Based on information from the phone.
Well, this information that the 631 and 57, 632 and 19, 633 and 36, how did you first get that piece of information?
That came from our forensic tools.
From your forensic tools?
Yes.
So that was not something that anybody handed to you? Could you explain to us what you mean by forensic tools and exactly how you got that off April's phone?
Our forensic tools are the software that we use excuse me, to analyze a piece of digital media. Those tools are different between when you analyze a computer versus when you analyze a cell phone. The tool we used a couple of different tools to look at this particular iPhone. We used a tool called Celebrite Physical Analyzer.
I'm sorry, what's the name?
Celebrite Physical Analyzer. And another piece of software called Lantern.
What's the second one called?
Lantern.
Lantern, okay. This probably isn't going to make a big difference, but would it matter to you if it turned out that the 3 calls indicated by April's cell phone records was 1 at 1831 and 2 at 1832? I know we're talking the seconds here because you said the last one was a 6:33:36.
Could you repeat those times for me, please?
Yes, sir. There's no seconds, so I don't want to mislead you. Call number 1 at 1831.
Okay.
And that's the one that you have, which is correct. 6:31 would be 1831 and 57 seconds. Second one is 1832, which according to here, and that's the one that you have at 6:32:19. That would be correct. And then the last one is also at 1832, and you had 6:33:36, which is translated to 18:33:36. Would you trust your app thing that you just talked about, or would you trust that some ones? I know we're talking seconds.
Could you tell me, please, where that data came from again, please?
Yes. Ron, I believe you indicated we have standing permission. that help refresh your recollection at all, sir?
I was just curious as to where that data came from.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Actually, I'm not going to believe your point because we are talking about a minute and seconds, but obviously all this accuracy is not so accurate, right?
Well, there's a difference between cell phone records from the service provider as opposed to the data that's taken directly off the device itself.
Okay, so now if I understand it correctly, you create this thing, you want ladies and gentlemen of the jury to look at it like it's the gospel from the Bible, but now you're saying, well, you know, I got this information from here, but I got this information from here, it would be different. Just believe the version that I want you to believe. Is that essentially what you're saying, sir?
That is not what I'm saying.
So what are you saying?
All I'm saying is the data that is taken from the phone is the only data that I'm privy to. Is the data that we do during our exam. During the course of a forensic examination, we don't request the call records for that device. That's not within our purview.
I may have forgotten to see what's Verizon. Remember what service provider she has?
I do not.
Just for example, so I guess what you're saying is, I'm Matthew Zenz with the FBI. I'm going to sit here and analyze this based on what I have, what I download, because I trust my software, it's all better. And if Verizon or Sprint or AT&T or T-Mobile tell me these are the times, no, these carriers, they don't know anything. I know more. I've been doing this 15 years. Is that essentially what you're saying?
That's not what I'm saying.
So what are you saying?
I'm just saying there's a difference, and if there's a difference, the only data that I'm responsible for, or that's within my area of expertise, is the data that we forensically get from that device.
Just give me a few quick seconds, sir. It's off my source sheets. We may have to go back to the animation for this. If you're not familiar with the area, do you remember how long? If I remember correctly, according to the animation, April Millsap's phone comes out of the home, right? And goes up, and I'm not familiar with Armada at all either, so up one street and down another towards the trail, right?
Correct.
Okay. On Main Street, where there's a four-way stop, do you recall the animation stopping, like she's stopping for anything at all, or do you remember it just continuing?
I don't recall specifically. Is that at the beginning of the animation?
Yes, sir.
I don't recall exactly.
Okay, so you don't recall that there's a stop no matter how brief, correct?
Correct, I have to see it again.
Okay. And these zigzags, please explain one more time, what are they? When we're saying, we're just going over trees and so forth like that, and across lawns, and across pools. What are we seeing?
That's the result of the data obtained by the GPS device, or the GPS within the cell phone.
Now, I guess there's no better way to put it, but there's like a frenzy of activity for a few moments, right? 15 minutes or so.
Yes.
Say when the young lady comes back, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your position that that movement is reflective of the physical movements of whomever had the phone, or is there just more bouncing there?
It's reflective of what the GPS was reporting.
Yeah, no, I hope it's not troublesome. I'd like to play that animation and ask him some questions along it.
It's up to me. I don't control it.
You want to play the animation?
Yes, number 11.
If you want it at a certain point.
Let's start off at the beginning and then I'll ask you to come back.
You want us to take the lights down?
It's just a little bit, thank you. It's okay if you...
Would you like me to sing?
Yes. I know I can't read it from back there, but I'm just going to point out these things. So that's a phone path, correct?
That's correct.
And this is the departure from the whole section, correct?
Yes.
So maybe while I was getting this, but there hasn't been a stop, right? So continue.
I did not see it.
Keith, if you could, is there a way to fast forward to
What point would you like?
to the part where she comes back after leaving the scene, where her body's found and comes back? Where the 15 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Here it is going over fields, correct?
It appears to be going on.
Just again, this says phone path and it's headed back up to where your pin cushions are, correct?
That's correct.
Keith, could you pause it here for one moment? And then I'm just going to ask you to indicate, in case of ladies and gentlemen who can't see, what does this first pin cushion say?
It says phone call number 1.
And what does this one say, sir?
I'm sorry. May I?
Yes, you may.
This is phone call number 1 right here. Did you want?
Yes.
This is phone call number 2. Phone call number 3. Like the rest. It says body location.
And am I missing it? There's a text on it.
It was further down the path, but we've already passed it.
Keith, I hate to, can you back up to the text, please?
Is where.
And that's the last text message, correct, prior to the phone call.
That's correct.
So if this is a 6:28, and I believe the first call is at 6:31, can you just move forward in real speed from here? This is accurate. I would tell you this takes about 3 minutes to get there. Pause right there, sir. Is that, I don't want to mispronounce your last name, that's what I'm saying. Is it Zant? Zantz, okay. Agent Zantz, these 3 phone calls, from what we know, were made at least within minutes of each other, either within 2 minutes or 3 minutes, depending on, right?
Correct.
Okay. And I don't want to put you on the spot because I have no idea. Is there anybody who can tell what the difference is between in location and or location from phone call 1 to phone call 2, or is there no way to tell that?
Standing here, there's no way to tell.
Okay. In putting these pin cushions there, how did you decide to put phone call 2 pin cushion there versus here or here or here? I'm just curious.
Based on the time of those calls, matched up with the coordinates of the phone, the GPS, the latitude and longitude, because I have latitude and longitude data for those phone calls, or for the data point. And based on the time that call was placed it at that GPS location.
Okay, so then when we move a little forward, this is in real time, right?
That's depicting the real time.
So that should match up with the place. Let me describe my notes before we go there. Keith, I don't know if you could get to 6:31 and 57 seconds, or as close to it as you could get. If you could get to maybe 6:31, well. Yep, very close. Get back up just a little bit and then stop at 6:57. We were at 6:32. Right there is good. So is that what you did? You stopped it? Again, I'm not trying to second guess what you did, but basically, if you have information that a call was played at 6:31, 6:57, you got as close to it as possible, and you somehow put the...
No, we had the GPS track data,
Okay.
the latitude, longitude, and time. Those 3,000 data points that we had. We went in and found the data point for 6:31 and whatever the seconds were.
Keep your
57.
voice up, please.
I'm sorry.
You gotta speak loud.
So, I'll repeat. We have the data points for the whole track, the 3,000 data points. And for 3,000 data points, that's about a data point every second for the duration of that workout. So we have a latitude, a longitude, and a time associated with all those. So I went found that time associated to the 6:31:57, and then placed a pin on the associated latitude and longitude that went with that.
And you let it go to 6:32 and 19. Shouldn't take long. I'm a little confused. I know this is at double speed, right?
The display is at double speed,
Right,
correct.
display. So that little bit of time that we just went between phone call and phone number 2, is that at double speed, or is that in actuality the time? If these are,
The times are actual, so.
So I know that the time of this call is, is there, but what I'm saying is that few seconds that we just stood in silence as we went from phone call to phone call 2, is that reflective of real time?
If you'd like, we could play it at half speed and it would show it at actual speed.
If you don't mind, Detective Pete, could you go back to 6:28:17, which is the text, or thereabouts, a little bit before that, and then just let it run at real speed. Thank you, that's a good idea. So now this should give us the actual time that transpired between all these events. Thank you. Is that, what is that?
That's a, excuse me, that's a function of Google Earth. It's trying to orient the view with the direction that the arrow is facing.
I know that's the direction we're going in. Is that always reflective of north, or is that not the way this is set? The arrow effect that it's pointing, that has nothing to do with that, right?
That's the direction of travel.
That's how VanCallis is supposed to respond.
Yes.
Is that just an actual pulse right there?
That's
Just
a pause in the data, yes.
According to your animation, what's happened right here?
As far as what, sir?
Activity or lack of activity, so stop everything, stop right there at this point.
The device is now moving.
again, this is all activity of the device, correct?
That is correct.
We don't know if April has it, if Sarah has it, if Dog has it, or somebody else has it, correct?
Correct.
Do you agree that whoever has it or whatever has it is kind of like a hodgepodge? There's doesn't seem to be any movement towards a particular direction, correct?
I would agree with that.
Thank you, sir. Would it be fair to say, based on this, that you saw several pauses before this activity, whatever it is? Obviously, you've seen some during the activity, correct? Whatever these pauses were.
Correct.
Thank you. And we don't know for sure if these pauses are glitches in some sort of software, do we? Or could it be?
I don't know if it's a glitch. It's just the GPS data as recorded.
You may be too young to remember this, but back in the internet, there's this thing called buffering, where whatever you were stopping, you would just stop and say buffering.
Oh.
When it pauses, could it be something along those lines?
When the animation pauses?
Yes, sir.
I don't believe it's due to buffering.
Does that even still exist?
I think so.
If you notice, this is the time frame and activity that the prosecution is indicating that act took place. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Keep it stop there. That's fine. I know you indicated you never went out to that scene, but from that activity that it seems like that occurred when the assault took place, did you come to find out if there was ever any manning of the leaves and the brushing in that area?
That was never reported to me.
Okay, so you don't know one way or the other, correct?
That's correct.
And does the speed that a person's moving, does that, the zigzagginess that we saw, does that affect that? In other words, is there more zigzagging if something is moving faster or slower?
It would appear that there would be more zigzagging if you're moving at a slower rate.
And why would that be?
When you're moving slowly, you have more time between positions for the GPS data to read your position, as opposed to when you're moving quickly. If it's taking a reading every second, when you're moving quickly, you're going to be much further along than if you were walking.
Just 1 second. And you indicated how you came to find out what kinds of texts and phone calls were made. What information were you given to tell you where to put the pin for where the body was found?
That came from FBI agent Christopher Hess.
Okay. And was that information, just so we could keep track of this, was that longitude, latitude, that obviously can have been time?
Correct, those were latitude, longitude coordinates that I was provided.
And do you know what GPS points are?
I have a general knowledge of GPS points, yes.
Okay. Would you tell us what they are?
Well, in what context?
Well, in context of if you're trying to show the accuracy of something, or how many GPS points exist. First, what are GPS points to the best of your general knowledge?
GPS points would be, as we discussed, a latitude and a longitude gives a location on the Earth.
Okay. And how many points are there that tell you where something is? How many points hit and reflect off you? Do you know?
I'm sorry, how many points of what?
GPS points that, GPS is global positioning systems, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So there's satellites up there that bounce signals back and forth, correct?
That's correct.
And then so your movement is determined, I guess, how soon you one signal move to another, something like that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And it's read by what are called GPS points, right?
I don't believe it's read by GPS points. I believe a GPS point describes a location on the Earth in latitude and longitude.
Okay, isn't there a quantifying manner in which you determine how accurate it is by how many GPS points something hits?
Are you talking about GPS satellites? I don't know.
No, GPS as you use it here in this animation.
I'm going to need some clarification on the question because it's a little confusing to me. I'm sorry.
Okay. Let me give an example that I asked the jury when we were picking the jury, okay? You have two cars that come off the assembly line. Both come off the GM assembly line, both are, let's just say, Cadillacs, okay? Both have navigation systems, and you tell them you want to go to Belle Isle. And one says 17.2 miles, and one might say 16.9 miles. That can happen, correct?
Sure.
And why would that happen if the two cars are right next to each other, off the same assembly line, both have navigation systems? That's not a trick question, because it's happened to me. I just want to know what is the measuring that determines that? Why one might say 17.2, one might say 16.9.
I guess it would be the difference in the GPS system itself.
So if a GM car came off the assembly line, would they both be using the same system?
They would probably be using the same system, and it would be the difference in how it sees each vehicle, or each system, if you will, could see the satellites that it's trying to connect to.
What does that mean in plain English?
Well, in order to find, for a GPS to find a location on the Earth, it has to be able to send and receive a signal from the global positioning system.
Okay.
So if two cars are in different, well, they might be right next to each other, but they're not in the same location.
Okay.
They're not overlapping each other. They're in different locations. Might be further out on the decimal point, but they're not the same. And there could be interference coming from the vehicle itself that blocks the signal from the GPS within the vehicle, each vehicle, and that could show up as a difference in distance to a location.
Okay. Even a difference of a mile or two, just for the vehicles being next to each other. An example that I gave. 17.2 miles versus 16.9 miles, for example, from somewhere down.
If that's did that really happen?
No.
Okay. But I don't know if that would be the case then.
Well, hang on. That happened in terms of that kind of deviation. It wasn't validity. It is what didn't happen. I did sit there and validity. In other words, I've had car put it in there. Not two Cadillacs, right off the sun, like the same. But where you have the same two cars in the driveway, and it's okay, how far to go to, Somerset? One would say $1. So you're not denying that could happen. They could get different readings, correct?
I would have to see an example of that.
Okay, but you just indicated and
They could be different, sure.
Okay. And then that would affect.
But I wouldn't expect them to be different by a mile.
You would not.
I would not.
What would you expect them to be different by at the most?
Fraction of a mile.
I'm sorry, just one more second. You said the Bureau purchased a brand new cell phone, very similar to April's, correct?
Yes, we purchased the phone, yes.
Okay. Do you know how much more current it was than April's?
I believe April's was an iPhone 4S. The model that we purchased was an iPhone 5. Both were running version 7 of the iOS, the operating system.
Okay. I think somewhere in your data you indicated the average speed on this was like 4.8 miles. Do you recall that?
I believe it was something like that. I'd have to see the video again too.
And that again would, because the car where it's going fast and where it's walking, correct? Because I mean, we see here where it moves really fast and then it moves slow.
It's
right?
the average over the entire length of the workout, yes.
Okay. And would the zigzagging have affected that?
The zigzagging just, again, is just the speed. Being able to read the GPS satellites in a longer period of time, or you're moving slower, so that would induce some of the zigzagging, if you will, because it's able to get a reading much more sooner after you've moved from one position to the next.
Thank you for your time.
A couple of questions, special agent sense. First, did there ever come a point in time in the data that you received that maybe you didn't depict to the jury, like where the path all of a sudden deviates down to Sterling Heights, right in the middle of it, and then it comes right back up here to, I mean, did you just clip that out in a minute?
No.
Did you see data points that appeared, well, look, we talked about it going through some trees, through some buildings that are adjacent to the path. We've talked about that. I've asked you about that. You've been asked a lot more about it. Did you see any data or other things that you omitted because they didn't fit a picture you wanted to create later?
Nothing was omitted.
Did you in any way try to create data to make this look better, like insert a point to make it look better?
No.
So nothing was added?
Nothing was added.
As far as dog speeds, do you have any experts on how fast border collies run?
I do not.
Did you perform any testing racing dogs to check?
I did not.
Okay. In terms of, we can get into this perhaps with a different witness, but I guess I just want to use the term about records from phone companies. Are you familiar with the term call detail records?
Yes, I am.
And can you just tell the jury in a very general sense, because I want to get into call detail records. What are they? Because you were asked about that.
Call detail records would be the analogous with your phone bill, what you would see, the detail you would get in a phone bill as to when calls were made. Provided by whatever provider you have of your phone.
So that there's certain information that if you're in a Sprint would keep for each phone call you make for a certain period of time.
That's correct.
What you used, just so we're clear too, to create this animation and then also to display what the Sport Tracker app did, that was data from the actual physical hardware of the phone. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, yes.
And obviously that hardware interacting with the software application.
Correct.
Of Sport Tracker.
Correct.
And the reliability of GPS, and by the way, the Sport Tracker app, you were asked about having direct contact, I think talking with people there. Were those folks cooperative with you?
Yes, very.
And when you loaded it onto the pristine iPhone, how much did you pay for the Sport Tracker thing to do your test?
The application was free.
So it's a free app.
Correct.
That people have on their iPhones, correct?
Correct.
And maybe Androids, Blackberries.
Perhaps.
Okay, and the output is what we see here from their GPS coordinates.
The iPhone Video 2, where we show the screenshots from our test iPhone, that is data direct from April's phone as loaded onto our test iPhone.
And the animation is as a result of that company giving you yourself the coordinates. So here's what we got. Here's all the data yourself, and that's what you came up with.
That's correct.
One last thing in terms of reliability of GPS, and we already covered, and Mr. Sheik asked you, you actually got asked a lot of questions about GPS systems and how they work. And I know you said already that is not your field of expertise. Is that correct?
That's not my field of
There's
expertise.
some knowledge about it.
I do.
You are a forensic examiner in terms of extracting data and examining software and hardware.
That's correct.
But you have some general knowledge of GPS. To your knowledge, do people rely on GPS every day if they don't know where something is, like on a drive somewhere?
Yes, I do.
You do.
To get here.
And to get here.
Correct.
If you're driving down in the right lane of I-94 and you get over into the left lane of I-94, does that thing on your phone or your GPS or whatever you're using to track yourself and give yourself directions, does it all of a sudden change? Or is it still going in that straight line if you're going in the same general direction?
It doesn't necessarily change, no.
Did you run into any walls or anything on the way here, finding you're using your GPS?
I did not.
All right, very good, thank you. I don't have to.
Very briefly.
And first of all, did I, in any of my questioning, in any way insinuate that you somehow manipulated these data points or added information or anything like that?
I don't believe so.
I think just the gist of your testimony is that everything you took to create this animation, you got from elsewhere, correct?
Got from the phone, yes.
Well, got from the phone, got from Fairland, got from
the company.
information given to you by Hess and other people.
That's correct.
That is, you got it from multiple sources, correct?
That is correct.
So this animation can only be as accurate as all those sources of information were in main data, correct?
That is correct.
And the zigzagging, you know, when we go back to what he was talking about, the zigzagging of the iPhone app up to total of, did they total up to 4.8 miles?
I would have to, I believe that's somewhere in the right range. I'd have to look at the video to verify that.
Okay. And then if it's actually an animation, if it's less, then would that mean that something is off? If the speed in there, the miles per hour in there is off, would that indicate that the zigzagging?
The total distance traveled should be the same.
One last question. In the past, if you've created something, have you ever went out to look to see if it's reflective of what you created? In other words, I leave this courtroom and I go home and I draw 13 little lights to represent the 13 square lights in the courtroom. Maybe the next day I come in and I look up and say, was my recollection correct? Oh yeah, there are 13 lights as I remember. So in this particular case, you created this, but you never went out to see if it really, if the territory meets the map, correct?
I did not go out to the scene.
Thank you. Nothing for the
I have nothing else to say.
Thank you, sir. You are excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And we're going to take a 20-minute break. Folks, you're free to go wherever you want to go. See you back at 3:20.
All rise for the jury.